just like everyone's help in welcoming Hannah to the stage. Give her a big round. She's going to talk to you.
I hope you have found a friend.
Here's your clicker.
For me.
Closing time. Every new beginning comes from someone.
Can you guys hear me? I had a friend when I was becoming an adult who always pulled out his guitar at parties and played that song. It was awful. I'm glad you can hear me. I have a weirdly small head and like no hair to make up for it, and I'm also a dropper. I can't hold a microphone. I just dropped my pen. Okay, so I'm Hannah Messenger. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pantry Raid. Pantry Raid is both a game we play on Instagram. Every Monday, people write into me about what odds and ends they have in their kitchen, and I tell them what I would make with them. And it's also a podcast inspired by that game. Every episode is about how to make more food and less waste, one ingredient at a time. And like most things, Pantry Raid began with an ending. Unlike most things, it actually began with 3. And there's 2 kinds of endings, right? There are endings we choose, which are sometimes really fun, like we walk out on a job that didn't treat us right or pay us enough, and we're like, see you suckers. And then there's endings that are out of our control, and those are not as fun. The story I'm about to tell you, I was only in control of one of the 3 endings that happened. And obviously you can take away from this story whatever you like, whatever helps you creatively. But I did want to mention before I start, I really hate it when people hear a story like the one I'm about to tell you, and then they say, oh, everything happens for a reason. That just sounds really passive to me. And while sometimes endings are out of our control, and by definition we are passive in them, what happens in the wake of them is anything but passive. I didn't just find myself here this morning. I got here by asking myself hard questions, making big decisions, and if I'm being really honest, by bothering Colin every single time I've seen him this entire summer. Thank you, Colin. I have these moments all the time. I'm actually having one right now where I wish I could go back in time to myself in December of 2017 when this story starts and tell myself that this right now is my future, and I got myself here by doing the work. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is creative problem solving that helps you move forward in the wake of an ending. So, in December of 2017, I decided not to go home with my husband to Pittsburgh for Christmas, and we very quickly decided that he was going to become my ex-husband. Then a couple days later, my parents told everyone, including me at the same time, it was a surprise, that our family restaurant that had been open for 63 years was closing. So that was the end of my marriage and the end of my backup plan. When your family has a business, it's kind of like, whatever happens, you can always go back and work with your family. End of my marriage, end of my backup plan within the span of a week. And then about a month later, actually on the day my ex-husband came back to get all his stuff and take my fur baby away forever, I was unexpectedly laid off from my job that I had moved to Chattanooga for. And just to give you a picture of my mental state at this point in time, as my boss was saying these words at me, like suspended in air, like, you can't work more here. You can't work here anymore. We jumped the gun creating your position. You don't have anything to do when you wake up tomorrow. I was just like, yeah, that seems about right. Okay. I was fully dead inside. So that left me with a lot of feelings and a lease that was now 11 months long. I had only planned to pay half of no reliable source of income, no safety net, and also in Chattanooga, I don't know if you've noticed this about Nashville or if only I feel this way, Nashville has the most incredible network of support. People here are so supportive, and I didn't have that in Chattanooga. I'm from there, I know people there, but I didn't have a group of people who always shows up. My people are all here today to support me. And I felt that immediately. I'd say my main qualifier by then was exhaustion. I was really exhausted by my marriage, and I was really, really exhausted from the years I had spent in Nashville leading up to that point when I had been a freelancer. I worked as a freelance food photographer for a really long time, and I just said yes to everything. I know that's kind of what being a freelancer is, but there's a really right way to do it, and there's a really wrong way to do it. And I had been doing it the wrong way for way too long. So I knew I couldn't break my lease, go back to Nashville, and just start doing that again. I needed a real solution. Are you guys familiar with Wendell Berry? Writer, poet, conservationist, farmer, angel among us? Okay. He says there are 3 kinds of solutions. The first one only addresses one facet of a problem and causes a domino effect of other problems. I mean, it's a quick fix. I like to call it being mean to your future self, which is not something you deserve, especially from yourself. Number 2, the second kind creates an ever-growing symbiosis between problem and solution, and that's the one I think as creative people and freelancers, entrepreneurs, we can get stuck in a lot. It's a cycle that's really hard to break out of that involves time, money, and energy. So it's like you need the energy to create the work, but you also need the money, so you take jobs that zap your energy, and then you just go round and round and round and round. And the third kind of solution is what Wendell Berry says is an enduring one, and he defines that by saying that it uses health in the most comprehensive sense of the word as the baseline. So I had been laid off one time before, and when I went through it that time, I truly woke up the next morning and mindlessly powered full steam ahead doing what I had been doing before, which was freelancing. I got stuck in that loop again, and I was like, I'm not gonna do that this time. This time I'm gonna do it really right. There's this thing I say all the time. It comes from a essay by Jonathan Safran Foer about when his son was born. His friend sent him a note, and it just said, everything is possible again. And everything was possible for me again. It sucked, but it was a new beginning. Not to quote the stupid song, but it was a new beginning. And the possibility that sounded the most appealing to me at the time, it made no sense personally. It made no sense professionally, and it definitely made no sense financially. It was getting some rest. So I did this really counterintuitive thing, and I decided that for all of February 2018, I was not going to drink, do drugs. I didn't socialize much. I didn't work, and I didn't make my own recipes. I followed, this is so unusual for the people who know me, I followed actual recipes in books to feed myself. And for the first time in 3 years, I was able to sleep through the night soundly. For the first time in years, I was able to plan an entire day and live it out uninterrupted or unworried by client emails. For the first time in longer than I can ever remember when I talk about this, I was able to look at all of the things living inside of me and stare them in the eye and see what they really were. At the end of February, I happened to remember this really amazing thing I saw when I was younger. It's a 2-minute talk by Ira Glass called The Gap, and we're going to watch this great video about it on Vimeo, so I don't butcher it.
Beide Positionen, vielleicht richtig vorgefertigt bin ich nicht, wenn ich ehrlich bin. Also dann
somebody tells people who are beginners, and I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that all of us who do creative work, like, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap, that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good, okay? It's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just like say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste, they could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. It didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, you got to know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you could do is do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month you know you're going to finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that. Okay?
I remembered this little talk because I was rereading Harry Potter. Show of hands who has seen or read the best Harry Potter? The third one, you guys? Harry Potter and the Prisoner? Yes, hands up, the best one. So just a refresher, this is a spoiler, but Colin told me that you don't deserve spoilers because the book came out in like 1998 and the movie is 11 years old. Like it's going to get spoiled for you. Someone else has probably already done it. So to refresh your memory, for the whole book, Harry Potter is trying to learn how to cast a Patronus charm, and it's really hard, and he can't do it. And he ends up on a lake shore in this life or death situation, and he's dying. And he sees someone on the other side of the lake cast a Patronus charm, and it saves him. And long story short, he time travels and ends up back at the same moment, but this time he's on the other side of the lake. And he's waiting and waiting and waiting, and he tells his friend, this is it, oh, by the way, he thinks it's his dad who cast it the whole time. And so when he's there again, he's saying, this is it, this is when my dad shows up. I always cry when I talk about this, you guys, I don't know why. I think it's the most touching thing. He's like, this is it, this is when he shows up. And all of a sudden he realizes it was him the whole time who had cast the Patronus charm, and he was only able to do it because he had seen himself do it before. And that's what jumping the gap is, making it to the other side of the gap. I started thinking about how I had done it before. I spent years and years learning to be a photographer and a food photographer and an event photographer, and it was so frustrating, but I had made it to the other side of that, and once I had seen myself do it, I knew I could do it again. And that was my baseline for health. I was rested, and I had my own vote of confidence in my problem-solving abilities to come up with something new. And life really changed after that. After that, I was able to actually get started making something new. And I did 5 things that I think really moved me. Ooh, can you still hear me? 5 things that really moved me forward. First, I started asking myself big questions, like I said in the beginning. Things like, where do I want to live? Do I want to go back to Nashville? Do I want to stay in Chattanooga? Do I want to live in a cabin outside of Burlington, Vermont, which is still kind of a life dream of mine? Do I want to continue being a photographer, and in what capacity? Do I want to learn about new technology and get into commercial photography? Do I want to get into print and try to show at galleries? Do I want to go back to what I was doing? And by asking myself that, I came up with the second step, which if you guys go to the Creative Mornings website and to the talks, you can see my friend Kate Moore's talk. She said this amazing thing, which I think we need to hear all the time, which was only take jobs that are a fuck yes. And to get to your jobs that are a fuck yes, you're gonna have a lot of fuck no's. So you kind of have to find your fuck no's before you get to your fuck yeses. So like one of the questions I asked myself was, do I want to pursue partnerships, sponsored content, product placement, that kind of thing? And for me, that was just the biggest fuck no. I'm not a good salesperson. That's what that is. That's being a salesperson, and it's great for some people, and I kind of wish I could do it because I would make more money, but like I can't do it because I don't like stuff. I own like 4 pairs of pants and this skirt, which I bought at Goodwill 9 years ago, and you have to like stuff to sell stuff. All my fuck yeses involved writing, and I had been really into zines for the first time ever. My friend Marley sent me runs she had written, and then I bought a couple more, and it seemed like a really fun, kind of minimal pressure, attainable project to take on by myself. And so I wrote a zine, and it was about making more food and less waste, because that's what my life was. It's a style of cooking that I always liked, but at that time, I was bound to for financial reasons, and the more I did it, the more I practiced it, the more I created a huge volume of work, the more I was like, this is delightful. Everyone should do this. And to stir up pre-orders in the zine so I could pay to have it printed and start selling it, I created this game on Instagram to prove to people that they could trust me in this subject, like making dinner out of almost nothing, where they wrote into me about what odds and ends they had in their kitchen, and I told them what I would make. And after, that was before it had a name, by the way, but after we played just the one time, I was like, this is too big of a conversation to live in a 20-page zine. It has to go out and live in the world as something ongoing, and it kind of struck me that no one buys zines and everyone listens to podcasts, and that's how Pantry Raid became a podcast. Which brings me to my third point. The third thing I did, which was ask for help when I need it, which I'm going to talk about how I ask for help in the podcast for later, but I think when you're creating something new, the person you have to ask for help from the most is yourself. You have to talk to yourself like a crazy person. There's this book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. If you've ever read it, it took me months to read it because so many things in it I agreed with so vehemently, and so many things in it I disagreed with kind of violently that I would have to stop reading it very frequently because I would get too heated about it. Anyway, Elizabeth Gilbert believes that ideas are these like invisible things that live out in the world, but they're entities, and they come to you and ask to be like birthed into the world, and you make a contract with them like it's a person that you're going into business with. And that's like a little too out there for me. But there was a point in time where I asked myself for help by saying, like, what if I behaved like I believed that this week? Like, what if I gave myself the help of pretending like I was showing up to work with a business partner and not just like in my house by myself having doubts? And it was really helpful. Sometimes you have to just like reframe your own state of mind. The fourth thing I did was be patient with myself, and I'm not going to elaborate on it because that's the whole thing. You have to be patient with yourself, and it's really hard. That's it. The fifth thing, and definitely the most important, I was so happy when Colin told me the theme this time at Creative Mornings is end, because the most important thing I did was put an end to being dishonest with myself. I really let go of the narrative that wanting to be successful at my own thing is vanity, and vanity is bad. In honesty, what kind of walks around in the world masked as vanity, a lot of times is just you believing in your own work. And it is just a good idea that needs to be brought into the world, and you're the person to do it. I had to be really upfront with myself about photos and recipes. I had a photo blog in 2011. And back then it was really easy to get people to listen to you when you were talking about food. I was like by no means one of the first photo blogs about food, but I was certainly on the crest of a wave in 2011. And now it's like literally everyone and their mother has a photo blog about food. It's my food photographer friends, like, yeah, they're gonna put me out of business. Because some people, it's hobbies, and that's cool, and I love that, but it's like now everyone expects everything for free. And I told myself I had to come up with something that was more interactive, more unique, more dear to my heart than putting things out in the world just saying, like, look, I made a tomato pie. Yeah, it had to be something more than that. We already talked about how I'm not a salesperson. Can't say it enough. I'm not a salesperson. I don't want to sell your product. Please don't ask me to partner with you. And circling back to asking for help, I had to be really honest with myself about my own abilities. Podcasting was a totally new medium for me, learning to write for a podcast and learning to host for a podcast. And I came to the conclusion that doing those two things and learning to edit and learning to distribute and market a podcast, it wasn't beyond my abilities, but it was certainly too much for me to take on all at once. I was able to ask for help because I was honest with myself that to work into the quality and the timeline that I had in mind, I needed another person. And so I put it out there that I was looking for a producer, and I met Tony Gonzalez. He's actually done a Creative Mornings talk before, right? He works for WPL, and I can't say enough wonderful things about Tony. Tony's the man. So Tony and I started making this podcast, which is a really simple concept: how to make more food and less waste, one ingredient at a time. During every episode, I talk about what you can do with something. So for example, I break it down with chickpeas into how to use canned chickpeas, dry chickpeas, and chickpea flour. I talk about what not to do something. It's a segment called Don't Buy This. And Tony does this awesome like echo effect when I say that, don't buy this. And it sounds like a game show because Tony's hilarious. And then I talk about what you can do with that ingredient alongside other things you may already have on hand. So at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, shit hit the fan in January. You took February off. You did your brainstorming. You met Tony. You started working. And like in April, the first episode of Pantry Raid came out. Just to come up with the concept took 8 months. That's the frustrating part about creativity, isn't it? I think the other reason I really hate it when people say everything happens for a reason is that they tend to say it before their story has played out, which is it's kind of inviting life to bite you in the ass. Pantry Raid's story isn't over yet, and I don't know the end. It might become a book or a radio show or a TV show, and it might become absolutely nothing at all, but I'm excited to find out. And I know what it is to me, and how I'll always remember it is a conversation between me and people who needed help learning how to cook. So with that being said, I want to thank you for coming and listening to the Pantry Raid stories so far. And happy cooking. I hope you make more food and less waste.